Meet the immortal walking fish. It's weird, isn't it? Have you ever wanted to be slim, have a better nose, or simply remove that horrible tattoo of a playing card that your girlfriend asked you to get when you were 19? Honestly, it's a wonder I ever ended up marrying her at all. I know, it's dreadful. Perhaps you've chopped off a finger in a freak puzzle-related accident or sliced off your tongue on a particularly sharp apple. Who writes this stuff? Fear not, because you could be in luck. Meet the axolotl. This weird newt-like creature is probably most commonly called the Mexican walking fish, and it's weird, like really weird. Not only has this fish got legs, but it can even regenerate those legs and its tail. And yeah, I know some lizards can do that, but can lizards regenerate their internal organs as well?
You don't see that every day.
Like the kidneys, their liver, their heart, their eyes, and even their brain.
Oh my God!
Yeah, you heard that right. You can give this thing a lobotomy and it'll grow back. Now, as if growing back entire limbs, eyes, bones and their flipping brain isn't enough for this walking fish, Ambostona mexicanum, to give it its sciencey name, is thought to be technically immortal. Now, if you saw the live stream a few weeks ago, you may remember me mentioning an immortal collection of cells. Now, these cells were harvested from a black woman called Henrietta Lacks. In 1950, an African-American woman called Henrietta Lacks started feeling unwell and complained of pressure inside her tummy. Now, since she had already had many children by this point, and she was still quite young, her family assumed that she was pregnant again. And they were right. Henrietta started expanding with the new baby inside her, and then when the baby was born, the pressure still remained. Mrs. Lacks then visited the hospital on February 8th, 1951, where she had a biopsy, and it was found that she had cervical cancer. This ultimately ended up killing her on October the 4th of the same year, less than 4 months after the biopsy. But this is not the end of the weird tale of Henrietta Lacks. You see, it wasn't uncommon back then, and even now to be honest, to take cultures from sampled cells and then grow them. Under the Human Tissue Act in the UK, these cells become the property of the hospital that took them, provided of course that they've been taken with consent, even if the consent that was given was for something else. What the hospital did with these cells isn't really unusual. They grow them in a petri dish and inspect them for use and research and all of that sort of stuff until they've reached the end of their natural life. And this is where things went a bit weird. Most cells in our bodies have a natural end point, and it kind of works a bit like a clock. Now, DNA is made up of 4 chemicals represented by A, T, G and C: adenine, thymine, guanine and cytosine, respectively.
Oh, it's got all sciencey all of a sudden.
Yeah, don't panic, I'm getting there. Now, in base pairing, adenine always pairs with thymine, guanine always pairs with cytosine, and so each one can only pair with its opposite number, and this allows the DNA to split in half and repair ourselves by simply making more cells in our skin or bone or whatever. And this is how immortality just might be possible, by splitting these things. But we do have a problem. When human cells divide, as they need to, the DNA itself splits in half, because the DNA proteins that make up one half of the DNA double helix can only pair with the opposite number of that protein. So we only need one half of the string. So by splitting, that half can then go off and find all the chemicals that it needs to make a complete new DNA strand and a complete new cell. It's kind of like your kids going to uni while they're still immature idiots, financial drains on your own resources, and then when they come back, they're remarkably grown-up, responsible adults. Hopefully. The problem is that these cells usually drop off one of the end pieces of the DNA sequence. These are commonly called clock proteins, almost things that aren't actually needed in the DNA sequence for it to function properly. And they're called clock functions because each time they replicate, the number goes down by 1, so the cell can only replicate a certain number of times before it reaches its natural end of life and starts dropping off essential information or mutating, causing the process to stop and death follows shortly after, which sounds dramatic, but this is cell death, by the way, rather than killing the human entirely. Usually this just means that we start growing old and showing signs that our cells can't regenerate as much. Our skin isn't as elastic, it gets wrinkled and saggy, and hair goes grey, like that, and all that jazz. Well, that's not what this is. This is a little bit more advanced. The HeLa cells, as Henrietta Lack's cervical sample eventually ended up being called, kept on replicating. In fact, the cells themselves, provided they had enough fuel in the form of glucose, ended up killing the cancer cells. And so researchers took a sample from that sample and grew a second sample until that one was big enough to divide again and again. And some of these were then used in research, while others were sent to other hospitals for examination and inspection and to grow again. And so it has been for over 70 years. Henrietta Lack's cells have been dividing non-stop and without mutation for all that time. And there's been no slowing or death of those cells, which suggests that if she hadn't had cancer, it's just possible that she would look just as young today as she did when she was 31 years old. Of course, it's also possible that the reason that she got cancer in the first place was precisely because of these cells being so keen on growing and not being held back by anything as annoying as getting old. So, what about this axolotl character? Can he help us to regenerate? Can the HeLa cells help us to become immortal? And if so, can they do that indefinitely? Will we all become part fish, part human hybrid vampires in the future, capable of eternal youth and beauty, and hopefully without the fishy pong? Well, not only is this actually possible, it's also being worked on right now. Scientists have all they need, at least in terms of the physical things, to make this happen. The only thing that's required now is time. So maybe in the future you will benefit from this research, and if you do, make sure that you stay with Real Wizardry, because I've got a lot more videos like this one coming up. So if you like this video, please click that like button. It tells YouTube that it was a good video and more people should see it. Remember to subscribe and ding that bell to turn on notifications of next time I go live or upload anything. These amazing people are my members and patrons from Patreon, and they help me out so much. If you want to be one of these wonderful people, you can join using the links just down below from only £1.99 a month, which is less than a cup of tea. Probably. I don't drink tea very often. I'm currently making my new website and it'll be online very soon. Here's a little brief introduction sneak peek thing. If you want to be a member, down there, by the way, I show you all of this stuff and I take your advice on what you want to add too, which is cool. But in the meantime, visiting the existing website can be done, again, link in the description, and once it's online I'll simply update the link, so it saves me mentioning this in the video and it kind of getting out of date, which is nice. I'll be back next week with some more magical awesomeness, but until next time, as always,
Very magical.
the problem is that these cells usually drop off one of the end pieces of the DNA sequencing.